like you said, it's not a straight shot. It's not like, oh, I attached a Great Commission to my work and now God's just going to say everything's easy, right? That it is a grind, and it is a get up every day and say, God, help me to see how I can work today. And I think that is the reality of some of this stuff, is that there's not a one size fits all. And that's what I think this podcast, as we continue to unfold, is we're going to see different people and hear different stories of people stepping out and going, I think this is where I'm going. Right. This is the gifts I have. I have this kind of passion for it, and I'm going to step into it and watch God unfold some really cool stories. Yeah. And we hope to inspire those that are in the marketplace and saying, I feel like there's more I can give. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Missional Marketplace Podcast.
Yes.
A brand new podcast.
That's right.
Started by the Stone Table here. And I guess I should introduce us a little bit because it's our very first episode.
Very first. I think we're the only organization on planet Earth that has not already launched a podcast.
So now we're jumping in the waters with both
We're in the game.
feet.
That's right.
I like it. So, well, I am Darren Cooper. I'm here with my brother, my older and wiser brother, Erik Cooper. And
you're my younger and taller brother.
I'll try to slouch. If you're watching this on video, I'll slouch a little bit, That's
right.
So
that's right.
But yeah, this podcast is all about accelerating the Great Commission through the marketplace. That's kind of the topic or the idea. That's what it's about. That's really kind of who it's for in some capacity. Yep. But maybe dive a little bit deeper into that. If somebody's listening to this for the very first time, who's this podcast for?
Why are we doing this, right? I mean, I think really this is about marketplace Christians, or this is for marketplace Christians who are passionate about God's glory in all the earth, about God's mission in the world, but they find themselves in marketplace work, right? Mm-hmm. So marketplace believers who are passionate about God's mission, God's glory, and all of the earth, and have a desire, really, I think, to connect their everyday jobs and their everyday work to the Great Commission, or to the global mission of God in the world. And so that's what we want to talk about. And really, we're going to do these in series, right? So this will be season. This will be season 1,
right?
And we're going to do 12 episodes here in season 1. And just kind of see where this goes. But that's who this is aimed at, and what we're looking to do.
Yeah, and we want to generate that conversation, right? Because I think as marketplace Christians, you can easily kind of feel isolated, maybe like you're alone in some of those things. And how do I reconcile all these things? These big questions come up, and it can easily make you feel alone. And so we want to have those conversations. We want to step into that, even bring in some conversations from people that are out there doing some really cool things in the world. And that's really the point and the purpose behind what we're trying to do.
I think a lot of marketplace believers feel like they're the B team, right? Like, we've got pastors and missionaries that are out there. They're the A team, and we're just kind of the B team. And I think we want to change that dialogue, not to bring down the honor that pastors and missionaries deserve, but to really, I think, help elevate everyday believers and help them understand that who they are and how God made them is part of God's kingdom plan for the world.
That elevation piece, I think, is key, right? It's bringing you up to realize that your work matters, what you do matters, that there's a purpose and a meaning, and it's not just wait around until the next thing happens,
That's
right? And so, well, Erik, there are a ton of podcasts out, as we've already mentioned, right? There are podcasts that deal with
1 or 12 million.
Right. There's podcasts that deal with faith and work. There's podcasts that deal with the Great Commission, all kinds of stuff. So really, my big question to start us off on this episode is really, why are we doing this? What do we have to bring to this conversation? Maybe a little bit of our story, a little bit of your story, even. But why are we doing this? Why Missional Marketplace Podcast?
Yeah, we were just bored. We didn't have anything to do.
We had nothing else to do. Nothing else to do.
No, I think a lot of this and a lot of what we do, even here at the Stone Table, it started with my personal journey. In fact, if you look at my work journey, and and yours isn't yours is a little similar to mine as well, right?
But
we've both been in the marketplace. So I started out in the marketplace.
Yeah.
You know, I went to school for music, graduated with a degree in accounting. I don't know how in the world you do that, right?
I don't either. As a musician myself, I'm still questioning how you do that.
So then, you know, worked for a CPA firm, worked in private accounting, then ended up taking an unexpected and unplanned 12-year detour into full-time ministry.
For sure.
And then about a decade ago, switched back over, and now I'm back kind of in this brackish water, I like to say, between the marketplace and ministry. And so,
that's a good way to put
you know,
it.
I've really wrestled with a lot of these things. And I think I wrestled when I went into the ministry. I didn't like people calling me pastor. It just felt odd. It was an identity problem. But then after 12 years, when I stepped out of full-time ministry, it was weird not being called pastor.
Right.
So just now, you know, being back in the marketplace for the last decade, realizing that I was struggling with my identity and purpose because my passion for the gospel, my passion for the mission of God in the world had not changed, but my job had. What I got up and went to work to do every day had. I was back in the marketplace, and so I didn't know who I was anymore.
Right.
And I think as I wrestled with that personally and tried to reconcile with that personally, I realized, at least from our experience, I'll say from our experience, Darren, I had very little theology of work and understanding good work theology. And I don't think that was intentional. It was just not something we grew up talking about. And I know there are some denominations and some churches that talk about that a lot more. But we didn't grow up around that, right? And so, you know, I had this passion for the work of God, for the gospel. I had this passion for global missions and ministry. But every day I got up and I went to a job that most people would call secular, right?
Yeah.
Like I had a secular job. So as I began to wrestle with this for myself, I began to talk about it myself, process it with other people. All of a sudden I realized I was hitting a nerve with a lot of people that I didn't even realize was out there. So I kept hearing these kinds of questions. You know, is there any eternal value to my day job? You know, is it possible to find gospel meaning in my secular work? You know, we're going to talk about that as the season unfolds.
Sure.
You know, and then this is a big one. If I really love Jesus, if my faith was really central to me, if I really love Jesus, shouldn't I just quit my job and go into full-time ministry?
A lot of people probably wonder that. If they're listening, they're going, I think that will resonate most, because I know even in my life, it was the same thing, right? It's like, ministry is where the Great Commission happens, and we just fund it if we're out in the secular world.
Right, like our job is to go out into the secular world and harvest heathen assets and bring them back to the people who are, doing the real sacred work, right? You know, and then I think really at the heart of it all is this underlying question: how does my everyday work, if I'm a believer in the marketplace, how does my everyday work have anything to do with God's mission in the world? And I think there's so many people out there wrestling and asking those questions.
Right.
And so I think some of this is going to come from our own experience and the things we've walked through and wrestled through here with our organization. But I think they're universal truths that so many marketplace believers are wrestling with.
Absolutely. And I think the big thing that we want to begin to highlight, I think we've said it a little bit already, is just that your work matters.
Yeah.
Right? That it's not just a mundane thing that you have to do. And when you begin to see that your work matters and that it actually can have an effect in taking the gospel around the world, that there's some really cool things that can happen. And I think that's where we want to highlight some of that, have those dialogues, talk with some of those folks that are doing that kind of stuff. And so, well, you alluded to the Stone Table and kind of what we do a little bit. Maybe kind of put some context to what we do here and how it works for us. And hopefully that maybe sparks some ideas or some things for other people. Do they go, I see kind of how this works and what you guys are doing. So give us some context of that.
Yeah, and I guess before we talk specifically about the organization, let's go back to, I think, some of the roots that created that. I mean, you and I grew up in a global missions church.
We did. Yeah.
I tell people that we kind of slow baked in the Great Commission. We grew up under a great pastor, a man named Tom Pano, and Tom, I don't think a weekend went by that there wasn't a missionary in the pulpit.
Sure.
You pulled onto our
Sure.
campus, the flags of the nations were there. I mean, it looked like the UN.
Yep, it really did. Yeah. It really did.
You walk into the lobby and there's a giant globe sitting on a spare change fountain. We had missions conventions and we had
pictures of the missionaries, all the missionaries that we would help and support. Like
exactly,
it was everywhere.
Yep,
it was everywhere.
I mean, missions was just in the DNA, and then you go back even further. So our dad grew up as a PK, so I guess that makes us PGKs.
Yep,
pastors' grandkids.
Yes,
right?
that it does. Yeah.
And so my dad grew up in in a pastor's home. Remembers having to give up his bed for itinerating missionaries that were coming through town. Right.
Yeah.
So we just had this I guess intense passion for the Great Commissions. I mean, not one weekend would go by without the ends of the earth being mentioned, being sung about, being talked about, right?
Yeah, it's so true.
So then you kind of fast forward, our dad wasn't, he didn't go into full-time ministry, but I don't think he ever really lost those roots, right? No. And so, he had been an entrepreneur in the 80s and early 90s, was in the nursing home business, was in the restaurant business, had been a developer of condominium communities and things.
He did all kinds of things.
Yeah. Some things you probably wouldn't even want us to mention here. Nothing illegal, but
not putting all those on record.
That's right. But he was an entrepreneur and but walked with his passion for the gospel and his passion for the global mission of God in the world as well, right? And so in the early 90s, he was kind of in between gigs, and kind of looking for that next thing. And a dear friend of ours that was part of the church as well, a guy named Tim Shrout, was a real estate developer, second generation apartment owner and real estate developer, just incredibly successful at what he did, had discovered a program in affordable housing just because of his connection to the industry that was incentivizing nonprofits to get into the affordable housing business.
Okay.
And so his idea was, hey, we could use this grant program to start buying apartments. We could create a nonprofit housing company, and we could build a portfolio, build a management company, and then we'll commit from day one, we'll commit 50% of our resources to go back into developing the business. And then the other 50% we'll give right to the global missions passion at that time that was being stewarded under our pastor, this guy named Tom Paino.
Yeah.
And so it was an incredible idea that emerged. Tim and Dad were working on a couple of projects together. And so, Dad raised his hand in 1992, 30 years ago, and said, hey, I think I'd like to take that on, right?
And what I love about that story and might resonate with some folks is you look at what they did and there was opportunity in front of them. And they said, what opportunities do we have and what gifts do I have in front of me? Like for Dad, he goes, I'm not really doing anything right now. I'm in between gigs, and my gifting lends towards stepping into this,
and
right?
Business development.
And so sometimes it's like we look at this story, 25 plus years later, and we go, holy cow, that's amazing. How'd you have all that idea and you saw this from the beginning? Well, that's not always the case. Sometimes the case is you go, here's an opportunity, and here's what skills I have in my hands, and now I'm going to step into it. And that's what I love from Tom Paino's passion for missions that was kind of just spoken about to Dad and to Tim over and over and over again. Now they're going, hey, what skills do I have, and how can I step into it? And I think that's where missional marketplace ministry even happens, when you go, this is what I have, these skills that I have. Let's step into it now and see how I can take this message around the world.
Yeah. And so CRF, Community Reinvestment Foundation, was born in 1992. The year I graduated from high school. You were a little bit younger, still probably taller than me
grade,
at that point.
I think.
Yeah, he's still probably taller than me. But launched in 1992, and I'd love to say it was just a straight trajectory up.
Right.
It's been a long 3-decade, building, struggling, wondering if we were going to make it, thinking we were going out of business. But over time, the Lord allowed us to build a real estate company that really nobody owned. The ministry owned, the Lord owned, right?
Yeah.
And the Great Commission owned. And so to date, with our partners and all, we've been able to put about $15 million into the global mission of God in the world through through the work of our housing company, Community Reinvestment Foundation.
And I love it too, because I think, what did Dad say years ago about like, if he could give $1 million away maybe a year, he'd be happy. You know, like that was years ago he said that. And it's just now kind of getting to that place where you're starting to see it. But $15 million all these years later, I mean, you tell that story and you're just like, holy cow. Yeah. But to just see Dad get up and go to work every day, and that's what I think is encouraging encouraging, and also like, oh man, is that, like you said, it's not a straight shot. It's not like, oh, I attached a great commission to my work and now God's just going to say everything's easy, right? That it is a grind, and it is a get up every day and say, God, help me to see how I can work today. And I think that is the reality of some of this stuff, is that there's not a one size fits all. And that's what I think this podcast, as we continue to unfold, is we're going to see different people and hear different stories of people stepping out and going, I think this is where I'm going. Right. This is the gifts I have. I have this kind of passion for it, and I'm going to step into it and watch God unfold some really cool stories. Yeah. And we hope to inspire those that are in the marketplace and saying, I feel like there's more I can give. Yep. And then we're going to see some cool stuff.
Yeah, and that's ultimately what the Stone Table is about, right? So the Stone Table was launched in 2015, really to take the missions baton. All of our missions giving through CRF went through our former pastor, Tom Pano. And Tom is just such a great patriarch and just such an honor to stand on his shoulders. But Tom's 97 years old now.
He's 97 now?
He's 97.
Oh, man.
And, and I think the young age of 90 came and said, I think I probably need to slow down a little bit, right? So we launched.
I think it's time.
So we launched the Stone Table in 2015, basically to take that baton from him. So the Stone Table really does all of our missions investing and really steps into this space. You said it in the intro, right? Accelerating the Great Commission through the marketplace. That's really what the Stone Table is all about, is saying, how can we leverage marketplace people to see the glory of God through all of the earth? And that really is what this is about. And the story, I guess, just to give you some baseline of context for who we are and why we're doing this.
Yeah. I love that. And so now we see the Stone Table, right, kind of taking on this mission side of our business. And hopefully as you hear Erik talk a little bit about our story, you can kind of get a general idea of what it looks like for us. And I think the big thing is we're not going to say that our way is the only way, and now you have to
certainly not
come look like us. But hopefully that inspires some thinking through that. And now we're taking on some of the Stone Table stuff and going, okay, we want to inspire the faith and work conversation, encourage those marketplace believers. In fact, if you go to stonetable.org, you see
the Stone Table.
The Stone Table, so thestonetable.org. I think stonetable.org is like a literal table.
I think it's a table manufacturer.
Yeah, which makes total sense, right? But thestonetable.org, we wanted to begin to create resources, right? So we have videos and articles and blogs, and now this podcast will be in that thing that we continue to do. And so it's all there to hopefully inspire and to create some really good dialogue. But as part of one of those things, you've actually sat down and did the hard work of putting a book together, which has the lovely title of
Missional Marketplace.
Missional Marketplace, right? So that ties into the great stuff that we're trying to put together here. I keep saying stuff. It's these resources that we're trying to put together. So maybe tell us a little bit about the book that you've written, and kind of what sparked some of that.
Well, the book was a labor of love, about 7 years, I think, in the making, right? Like, how many books does a normal author write in 7 years, right? It took me 7 years.
Right.
But, it stemmed from, again, a lot of these conversations. I was having these conversations with myself. Like, I was trying to figure this stuff out for myself, right? And so friends would invite me out, to speak at their church, and, I'd go talk about faith and work, and I'd realize I was like really tripping all of these like passions for people, right? And so, so we started writing about this. We started doing, short video clips and Facebook videos and all that kind of stuff. But it ultimately turned into this book called Missional Marketplace: Finding Your Everyday Work in God's eternal plan. And so, the book is really not so much the telling of our personal CRF and Stone Table story, although that is in there to kind of set the stage, but it's really about documenting, articulating these things that we've had to wrestle to the ground as we built these organizations, because I think it unearths some foundational faith, work, missions, missiology, things that a huge percentage of marketplace believers are dealing with. But sometimes they don't know how to articulate it. They feel something, but they don't know how to articulate it. And so that's what we wanted to do with the book. And so we're going to use the book really kind of as the template for the first season of this podcast and kind of see, where that goes.
Yeah, kind of give us the outline. And so I guess I bring that up just because, we are creating resources. So if you're a marketplace believer out there trying to figure out these kind of conversations and how do I accelerate the Great Commission through the work of my hands every day, we hope to be somebody that can walk alongside of you, help you, inspire you through these resources in some way, shape, or form.
So really the way this is going to shape, I think, over the 12 episodes of season 1, the first part of the book and the first part of the podcast is going to be talking about our work and the great story, right? And when we talk about the great story, what we're talking about really is God's story. We're talking about the meta-narrative of Scripture. What is God doing? What has God been doing? Where did this start? Why did this start? Where is it going? What is God's story? What is the great story? And then how does my story, my individual story, and my work and the skill sets and the things God has given me to put my hands to, how does it fit into that larger dialogue,
That's
right?
good.
So who am I and how does it fit into God's larger story in the world? And then part 2 will be work in the Great Commandment. And I really love this part because I think really what so many people wrestle with is meaninglessness and purposelessness
for sure.
in their everyday work, right? And when we can connect first things first, when we can connect our story, our work story to God's great story, that's the first step. But then when we realize every day when we go to work, because of the gospel, and we'll get into this in future episodes, our work can become an opportunity to fulfill the great commandment, to honor God and love our neighbors. That's really what all work is. And if we can connect those dots between our everyday work and this great commandment, the 2 commandments that Jesus said were most important, love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Our everyday work can be a part of that, of that command and that call. And then finally, ultimately, we told you we're Great Commission, we're missions obsessed here. I mean, that's ultimately why we started this organization, was to fund global missions from a marketplace perspective. But we're going to talk about our work and the Great Commission, God's global mission in the world, to take the gospel to every ethnos, to every nation, tribe, and tongue, so that everyone can hear the good news of Jesus. And so that's going to be kind of the trajectory of these 12 episodes. And I really hope people kind of go on the journey with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we do invite you on that journey, whether it's to stay with us on this podcast as it begins to unfold. Episode 1 turns into 2, that turns into season 3 and 4, all that stuff. But head over to thestonetable.org and jump on some of the many resources that we have there. The social media stuff, obviously. You got the Stone Table. Actually, the handle is at the Stone Table. Is it _org?
That's Instagram.
That's Instagram.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I was like, I know there's an underscore in there somewhere. So the Stone Table _org. But yeah, join us in this endeavor. Join us in this conversation. Let's continue to inspire each other, encourage each other. And kind of this next part of the podcast, something that we want to do is what we're going to call the missional moment, right? Where we either interview somebody or read somebody's story of somebody out there doing some amazing things in the world. So I think that's where we're headed next on this, and I can't wait to see how these stories are told.
Absolutely. Yeah, excited to see where this goes as well, and would just be excited if at least a handful of people would go on the journey with us. This isn't just going to be about us. This is going to be about, I think, all marketplace believers. So if you have a passion for the gospel, if you have a passion for the mission of God in the world, if you have a passion for your life to matter within the context of this faith that you hold so dear, and you find yourself in the marketplace and you go, my gosh, like how does where I spend half of my waking hours have anything to do with it? Those are some of the things we're going to talk about over the course of this podcast.
Well, I love it. Well, let's get to our first missional moment.
For this episode's missional moment, we're going to hear from my good friend, Tom. I first met Tom at a Business as Mission event in 2018 or 2019, and I was really intrigued by his story.
So I started a business right out of college. So actually, we were still in college when we started it. So that was a little over 20 years of being in business, primarily in the marketing and advertising space.
Tom had just sold his shares in his business and was feeling this stirring and this calling to global missions. But all he had seen in the global mission setting was more traditional ministry models. And he couldn't figure out how all of these years in the business world would have anything to do with taking the gospel to the ends of the earth.
Almost every example that we saw was that. Lay all of your history down and go and do something very different. Because that's the model that had pretty much existed, that we saw, that we were exposed to. Not that that was the only thing, but that was what we were exposed to. Was going in a very kind of biblical theology background, evangelizing and that kind of stuff more in the streets and other places.
So on a number of different missions trips, Tom started encountering these missionaries that were working in a business context. And this idea of business as mission was still somewhat new to Tom. But as he interacted with these missionaries that were functioning in a business context, he began to see that he might have something that they needed.
So what we started seeing on some of those missions trips was, hey, the missionaries that we're meeting with that are running businesses are kind of in that same position I was when I was coming out of college in those early years of business, where I needed somebody, I should have had somebody that I could talk to. Somebody that I could ask questions to, talk to, that could coach and advise me. I didn't want a consultant. I wanted somebody who could actually come alongside me and mentor and coach me more than somebody who's going to tell me what to do. I needed to buy in. And as soon as we started getting into seeing more BAMs within the mission trips that we went on and the people that we started meeting, it's like, man, there is a heavy need for that out there and providing some sort of resourcing for these folks in a safe place where they can feel like they can talk to somebody.
So after a few years of planning and praying and strategizing, Tom and his wife Patty took their decades of marketplace skills and moved cross-culturally as missionaries to serve business as mission missionaries. And now they get to work with BAM teams in 20 countries across the world.
You hear the real story and what's happening out there. It's like, man, I get the opportunity to work with heroes every day in what they're doing. And like I get a chance to work with people here in the country that we're in, but also be able to impact people in 15, 20 other countries of people that I'm coaching. It's insane to think of kind of how the Holy Spirit is leading and guiding and impacting lives.
Business's mission is more than just an access strategy. Yes, we use BAM to get visas to get missionaries into strategic places around the world. But what we found is that business itself is actually a great mechanism for gospel connection and relationships. In fact, what we see through the relationships and connections that come through business is an actual shrinking of the timeline of people coming to faith in Christ.
In a normal kind of missional setting, it takes about 10 years for one person to come to know Christ. If that relationship with the missionary takes about 10 years. You drop that same situation, the same opportunity, the number of hours that it takes of 10 years in normal get-togethers, and you drop them into a work situation, they're seeing people come to Christ in 2 to 3 years if you have an opportunity to work with them.
Maybe Tom's story has stirred something up in you. Maybe you're a marketplace Christian and you have this passion for the Great Commission and the global mission of God in the world.
Here's what Tom might say to you.
If you're getting discontent with where you're at, confirm that discontentment is not chasing after somebody else's dream or because somebody else, you're kind of feeling pressured into it. It's like somebody else's right thing for you to do. Make sure that that's a goal or something that God has put in front of you, and then chase them, right? That goal can be achieved. And sometimes, like every entrepreneur, you got to walk into deeper waters. You need to do things that you're not comfortable with. You need to be stretched into other areas, but that's exactly where God tries to lead people when he wants to use them. Rarely does that stretching come in comfort. Stretching comes in discomfort, and we must go there.
I hope you've enjoyed our very first missional moment on our inaugural podcast. Just like Tom and Patty, we believe the work of your hands can make a global difference in the mission of God around the world.
All right. Well, that is it for episode 1. We've officially done it.
The first episode is in the books, the pilot episode.
There we go. Well,
it can only get better from here, folks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us today on the Missional Marketplace Podcast. Again, we hope this first episode was an encouragement to you, maybe inspired some thinking. And again, join us next week as we dive into the sacred secular divide.
That's right. The sacred secular divide. It sounds so theological and
exactly. And we're not the greatest theologians, but and
we'll actually do that by we're gonna go back to your middle school lunchroom. So that'll be the tease for next episode.
There it is.
Yeah.
So this season 1 will be 12 episodes long. We're going to be releasing them every week. So make sure that you join us. Thanks for joining us on this one today, and stay connected with us throughout the week as well. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram. And even LinkedIn.
And LinkedIn as well. That's right.
So that's where it is. So The Stone Table. And always we have a resource page at thestonetable.org. And you can catch it there.
And if you like this, do us a favor and subscribe as well, because that kind of helps establish us as a new podcast. So
that's absolutely it. So subscribe, like, all that good stuff. And until then, we'll see you here next time on the Missional Marketplace Podcast.
That's right. Accelerating the Great Commission through the marketplace.